If you enjoy racing against the AI or taking part in a career progression, whether it's racing in the dry, racing at night, or even racing in the pouring rain, you're going to want to set the AI difficulty and aggression to something that's challenging and something that's going to help you progress as a driver. I'll also take a look at how to get the best from your pit stops, so let's get into it. So hello and welcome back to the channel, and yes, welcome to another Assetto Corsa Competizione video, where in today's video I'm going to be taking a little look at how to get the AI set up so it's something challenging and something that's going to progress you as a driver. So let's get moving, let's get into the video and let's have a look at these settings. So moving on to the single player mode and into the sprint race weekend. Definitely going to be moving down to the opponent's skill level, and we'll start this at 80 as it goes from 80 to 100, and we're going to move the opponent's aggression all the way to 100 for a starter. But first, I definitely recommend moving into a practice session so we can spend a little bit of time getting the car to a level that's just acceptable to drive consistently, really. I definitely recommend probably spending about an hour during this session just trying to get the car dialed in so that it's not trying to kill you in any of the bends. You're not getting too much understeer or oversteer, and it's quite a predictable drive. So once you've got that set up and you're moving into the actual race weekend and just move into the practice session, you'll see that starting down at 80%, you're coming up on cars very quickly, and it's actually quite hard to get a fast lap in because you actually encounter so much traffic. So looking at the lap times here, you can see I'm about nearly 12 seconds ahead of the field, really, and it's definitely not going to be competitive to me to continue racing at that level. So let's move up and extend this to 85%, and as you can see, again, just coming back to doing the practice session, that I'm catching traffic literally hand over fist, really. It's just generally makes it very hard to get a flying lap in, and it's almost like one of those games where you have to overtake so many cars during one lap. So as you can see, looking at the timetables again, a full 6 seconds plus behind the rest of the field, and just looking at these lap times, there are definitely issues within the lap times, and I'll look over one of these a little bit more in detail as we get through the video. But just moving back to the single player selection and moving it up to 90%. And just a little tip here, as you're exiting the pit lane, some of the displays don't actually show you that you're in the pit limiter section, but you get the hazard flashing lights on the dash. That's just a little bit of an indication to show you what sort of speed you should be doing and that you actually got it engaged. I do love this little view here that shows the animation of the brake pedal and the accelerator pedal. Definitely one of my favourite views coming into Assetto Corsa Competizione, looking back at the replays. So having completed the next session at 90%, you can see that the AI are just 2 seconds behind now, and they almost got the lap time correct on this one. We're just a few thousandths out, but yeah, it's still wrong. But yeah, moving on, obviously still not competitive enough, and going to boost this all the way up to 95%. So moving into the next session, you can see that I'm definitely starting to get pushed and didn't actually make the top spot during this session. But just looking over these sector times, you can see that sector 1, I beat him by 100ths of a second. Sector 2, I beat him again by 200ths of a second. And sector 3, I still beat him by 6,000ths of a second. But for some reason, I'm in second place. It should have been a 48 lap. So yeah, definitely starting to get a little bit concerned here. Anyway, moving on with the 95% hardness, and having done qualifying, managed to qualify 5/10 faster than the previous fastest or next fastest guy on the leaderboard. Although I didn't have a look at the lap times on that one, I was quite happy to be ahead. And definitely moving into the start of the race, you're going to want to look at your tyre pressures. Now, predominantly the tyre pressures that you're going to be changing onto during your pit stop. I think usually it does have these set, but if you've adjusted the settings on the original tyre pressure, it doesn't actually carry over, so you need to make sure that these tyre pressures are the same as the ones you're going to be changing onto, just in case. Obviously you're going to run at the same tyre pressure. Obviously this is at 1 times time progression, so I'm going to be using the same tyre pressures, but if you were doing it in the evening, you might want to change them to a different tyre pressure that suits better later in the evening or earlier in the daytime. But a little error that I make here is not changing the driver selection to green out all the pit requirements, something that's going to cause me issues later on during the race, let's say, for example. So just getting the race underway, and as normal, just make sure you're warming those brakes up as well, so that they're all ready for down to turn 1. And with the lights turning to green, quite happy with the start, managing to stay ahead of the rest of the field as we approach turn 1, just keeping an eye on that rear view mirror, making sure no one's going to be colliding from the rear end, and turning nicely into turn 1. Yeah, everything goes quite nicely up until lap 2 really. The AI getting very aggressive on this corner, and he literally just taps me at the rear as if I'm not even there. Cheers for that. I thought really early on in the race might be worth continuing, but I then think I'm going to have to let all the field go past, but they all start sort of swerving towards me, like I'm probably the local parking attendant of some sort. It's like a bull to a red flag. So yeah, maybe the aggression isn't a great idea being on 100%. So back to the main menu and decrease that down to 90% and start the race again. And just reading the text at the bottom of the screen, a little mention there, the elephant in the room. What is the elephant in the room, you're probably thinking? Well, as much as the AI are very competitive, I seem to be losing so much time in the pit lane. Now, if you're lapping at a very similar sort of lap time to the rest of the field, the race really can be won and lost in the pit. So coming into the pit lane here, and I've still not noticed that I've actually got the brake set to change, which is going to give me a 1 minute 15 laps pit stop. So coming into brake, I thought I gave myself a good braking section there running to the pit, but the AI seemed to catch up quite a bit during that section. So still coming into the pits, and I'm just looking over the board on the left hand side, my pit board, and I just realised at that last minute pulling into my pit position, and it just really ruins the pit stop really. I think these pit stops aren't particularly very well orchestrated, so this is definitely something we're going to look at in the next section. You can see I sort of sit still there for about 3 or 4 seconds before the engine's engaged, and having come in first place, I'm leaving the pits in 4th. Now you've got to remember that these cars ahead of me are all lapping at very good lap times, the tenths of a second here and there, so the competition is definitely stiff, and I decide to be as thorough as I can, stay into the end of the pit lane there before making any sort of moves out. But during the rest of this race I managed to actually pick off 2 and 3, so I'm running in second place at this stage, but the number 3 driver is definitely getting on my gearbox. At this stage he's definitely all over the rear end. He does try to make a few moves here and there, and I'm very much having to drive defensively, covering off the inside line at numerous corners. So I'm definitely feeling a little bit of pressure here. something that's definitely goes hand in hand with racing online, to be honest. This is certainly a good level to be racing at. I think a good preparation for moving to online racing if you don't particularly do much online racing. I think the AI at 95% and 90% aggression give a very similar feel to the front of the pack, really. When you come to be racing online, you're racing with very similar level of competitors. But I just make a tiny error just through here, just picking up too much of this curb. Really doesn't bode well for the McLaren picking up that curb. The Porsche picks it up really nicely, but it really does cause the issues. And obviously they're just getting a little bit of a love tap. So I decided to go into the second race, starting in the 12th position, having not done very well during qualifying, or not really qualified at all, but really is nice just battling through the field. This in-car view again, just getting a little bit sideways and out of shape there. But yeah, really enjoyed coming through the field, starting at the back of the grid and just seeing how the race progresses. But yeah, coming into the pit stop once again. I've not practiced any pit stops at this stage really. I'm just sort of seeing a few pit stop suggestions on Avis's channel, as I'm sure most of us have watched. But yeah, just coming into the pit, making sure all those green selection requirements are done. Bit awkward coming into the pit stop there with 3 cars in front of the pit stop. You can't really get the car aligned. But yeah, we're going to look over just how important these pit stops are, and sort of following protocol, it just doesn't really work like that. But yeah, I ended up finishing the race in 7th place overall. Not particularly happy with that finish. Definitely need to look at the pit stops. So let's have a look at our pit stop compared to a good pit stop and a bad pit stop, and I'll just let this roll and we'll pick it up later on and look over the pit stop and break it down. So as you can see there, a very good example as to why you need to practice pit stops. So on the approach to the pit stop, I'd like to have the pit sort of screen on the left hand side engaged, and that's what I mean by the pit screen graphic. But yeah, spotting your braking distance on the approach and making sure that you're down to 31 miles per hour and into first gear at the start, making sure that pit limiter is engaged on the left hand side before you putting your foot back on the accelerator. Obviously as soon as you put the foot on the accelerator you'll be breaking the speed limit. So yeah, looking over everything on the left hand side of the screen now, need to make sure that everything's selected that needs to be selected, and you're not going to be changing your brake discs if you don't need to be. So then you're going to want to be putting your finger on the engine cut button, whichever one you've got assigned, and then spotting your braking spot. Now you're absolutely going to hammer that braking spot as you come in. So straight away, bang, foot fully on the brake pedal, fully committed to getting this stop absolutely nailed perfectly. And then your finger off of the engine cut button. So you're sort of applying the engine cut button as you start to press the brake button. And now you can just sit here, you can take a drink of water if you've had a long session, just relax for a few seconds while the team go about doing the business. And remember, you can refuel at this stage with no real penalties to time. So get your finger on that button again, ready to start the car, and then put your foot on the accelerator and hold both of them down. Now as soon as the car drops, it accelerates away and you can take your finger off the ignition button and get ready for banging in an absolutely mega lap on your out lap. Obviously the braking positions have now changed on the out lap, so you need to be nailing this first corner, looking for your braking spot again. No, it's not the 150-yard board anymore, it's the 100-yard board. So nailing the braking position again and then flying into that lap again. And I just do these over and over again. As you can see there, that was my 16th stop. So I just go all the way around the circuit, fly into the pit again and do another stop. It's really is important. So here we are then, moving into wet races. I do enjoy driving in the wet. It is a different skill altogether, I think, but something I enjoy very much. Definitely the rain effects as well, although the windscreen wiper doesn't do a particularly good job in the McLaren. But yeah, I managed to set a 7th place lap, and definitely don't use the automatic during wet weather driving. It's definitely far slower. Just seemed to change down too many gears really. But yeah, managing to go into 7th spot, and we'll just look over this lap delta again. Again in 7th place, 36.7, 36.7 the leader, 40.3, 40.3 or 40.2, and then 37.6. So in my eyes I'm only 4/10 behind the leader, but for some reason I'm down to a second behind him. So yeah, it's definitely something going wrong with these lap times. There really is. It isn't the same on all circuits. I have had a look on other circuits. They do the set to times properly. But yeah, let's get into this race then. Starting everything you need to start: windscreen wipers, brake lights, etc. Making sure that the tyres are the correct compound that you're changing onto, making sure the brake discs aren't going to be changed, and making sure you're swapping the drivers, and so that everything in that green section, green requirements, is selected apart from the pit window, which will turn green at 10 minutes during this session anyway. But yeah, someone fix that wiper. I can't see anything. It really is a blind spot on the left hand side of the window, even though the wiper goes all the way to the very edge. It's a bit of a weird one. But yeah, getting those brakes warm again, obviously for the start of the corner, and getting the full throttle. I see him just hit the brake pedal there, and I think I'm definitely not slowing down. So from 18th place I've had a beautiful run down the start finish straight, and there's just a massive clear space in front of me here just to pick up all these drivers on the left hand side, and managed to get myself 7 positions just down to turn 1. And this Audi's definitely looking like he's slow on the right hand side, so he's nailed as well. And with the 2 other drivers looking like I'm going to be able to nip these in the braking zone to the next turn. Quite happy with the start, I've got to be honest. Yeah, just being confident on the brake pedal coming into this section, getting the car slowed down nice and early, and getting through there very nicely. Very happy with that start indeed, starting from 18th place. But yeah, coming round to do the round of pit stops, and I just see this Lamborghini. I'm not sure whether he's going to go into the pit or not at this stage, but if he does decide to go into the pit, it's going to ruin my pit entry. So I just decide to watch what he's doing and decide to base my pit on whether he's going to go in or not. He's obviously going to go in, so I then confront myself with doing another lap, just so that my stop's not going to be hindered at all. So yeah, just looking at the tyre pressures, make sure these are around 30.2 or 29.8, somewhere around that area, 30 being the best pressure to be running during the wet conditions. So yep, coming into my pit, and obviously as you can see previously I have practiced my pit stops this time round, and just coming in ahead of the Aston Martin, and just as you can see I'm pulling into my pit box, he pulls into his pit box, and we're almost up at the same time. So this time things are working far smoother. Yeah, as explained before, I'm doing everything as I did do, and dropping down and pulling out exactly the same time as the Aston Martin. So if I'd have nailed my approach, I might have just picked up a little bit of time getting a little bit closer to the Aston as I came into the pits. I think I was a bit ginger coming into the pit lane, but exiting the pit, more than happy with that stop, and managed to finish the race in 4th place, and that's not bad, to be honest. I think starting in 18th position with the driver AI set at 95% with 90% aggression, and I think if I could be more consistent, a little bit more running in the wet weather, I'd definitely be up there, having set a better qualifying position. So to conclude the video, what are my findings? Well, I'd definitely recommend 95% to 90% aggression if you're looking to get to a good level of driving, I think. And if you're looking to move to online racing, I think if you're racing the AI at this sort of level, you'd probably be looking to win between 80 to 100% of your races in online lobbies. Just build that consistency, that's the main thing. And especially during the wet weather, don't particularly follow the AI. Search out those puddles to keep the tyres nice and cool. The AI don't seem to do this. And one thing that I did listen to on Ross Bentley's Speed Secret podcast was a recommendation from another driver to build consistency, is to sit at the sim rig and do 3 laps, and then just pause the game as you come across the start finish straight, go and have a cup of tea, spend 10 minutes away from the rig, and then come back, jump in the seat, run another 3 laps, try and get them as competitive as your previous 3, and then go away again. Just do that numerous times just to build that instant consistency, and be hitting the lap times lap after lap, to maybe even to a delta, but just trying to build that consistency is what's going to win races online. You might see other drivers doing brilliant 1 laps, but if you can't race consistently lap after lap, that's where you're going to start winning the races. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it's been useful to anyone, and if you have enjoyed the video, please like and share it. Please leave a comment. As always, I do enjoy reading through them, and thanks for watching. So for those that are interested, I'll just cover the setup for both wet and dry. So let's take a look over these setups then. So as you can see, just choosing from the setup, it's been capable of a 149 dead in 28 Celsius. So as you can see, the tyres are set up for 28 degrees. The towing at the front, I haven't really adjusted this. I haven't spent long on this setup. It was just probably about an hour in the car. Cambers, I think, as they were, and the caster doesn't go as any higher really. I would have liked to have given that a little bit more. The steering wheel is quite light in the McLaren. Moving to the rear, yeah, 3.5 at the rear seemed to do quite nicely, although I think I do increase this for the wet setup. Electronics, traction control at number 3, and the engine map at number 1 for wet weather qualifying really. ABS number 4. Fuel setup, obviously it was for a 15-minute race, so 10 minutes would be 20 litres, and an extra 5 minutes, another 15 litres, or it'd be another 10 litres plus obviously the 3.7 laps just in case extra. Remembering to set these tyre pressures as per the ones on the tyres page for when you're changing your tyres, and remember if it's going to be dry weather, change to dries. Mechanical grip, it does oversteer quite a bit, this car, obviously because we're running quite a low downforce setup, and just increasing the anti-roll bar to try and emphasize the softer rear, really, to try and stop the car oversteering. Brake bias, I'd probably drop this down actually to 59. That's better there. And the steering ratio at 14. Obviously it depends on what brake pressure you use yourself as to what you want to set that at. And again, the wheel rates, obviously just trying to get the rear end a lot softer to try and stop any of that oversteer on corner exit, really. Doesn't particularly understeer a lot, I don't think. The front end grip wasn't something I felt like I was struggling with. And the dampers, I've messed with these quite a lot. If you look at the original setup, if we just come out of this and we'll have a quick look at the aggressive setup. If we come across to the dampers, you'll see that for me these dampers are set up wrong in my opinion, or I'll have to spend a lot more time in the game to make sure that this isn't particularly a negative effect. But for me, I would always like to see the dampers higher. So if it was this way around, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But when it's the other way around, I don't think it's right, to be honest. It should be this way around, really. But yeah, well, let's go back to my setup. So either of these ones was fine. It's the same setup, really. I always forget to load it rather than save it. So if you come to these ones, it just gives more response. Getting the main dampers harder than the fast bump. I really want to, when I go over curbs and things like that, undulations in the circuit, things that are going to cause the suspension to quickly after bounce, I want it to sort of be smoother through the bouncy stuff. So the fast bumps set quite soft, and the regular bump and rebound is quite hard. I want quite a stiff ride to give me more responsive feeling to how the car's performing. I ran the same at the rear. It isn't usually what you would do, but just for a limited time, really. I only spent an hour setting the car up. But because the front suspension, if we look on this page, is much stiffer than the rear suspension, you would generally carry that through. So as an example, you might want to run something like that, really, if you compared the two. Or you might want to stiffen, you might want to leave the rear end where it was and just stiffen out the front end a little bit more. Maybe that'll add more responsiveness, but generally I would go, if that's 15, I would go 30. If that was 10, or let's say if it was 6 to 8, I'd probably go 16. I generally just double it for the rebound. It's usually doubling a little bit more, it's like a third more. So maybe something like that. I don't know. But yeah, just something like that. Moving to the ride height, obviously it's as low as we're going to get it. There's not really any dips or anything on Monza to worry about the car bottoming out. The rear wing, I did try running it low, but the car just oversteers too much on corner exit. The brake ducts are just opened out just to try and reduce the tyre pressure, as try and reduce the temperature through the tyres, really. And that's it for the setup in the dry. Let's have a look at the wet setup. So I used the one down the bottom. I'm sure I made a few little tweaks here and there, and I ended up using this bottom one. So looking at, well, work in reverse then. Looking at the rear wing, obviously we've got a lot more rear wing on the car, just to give us a little bit more downforce. And the brake ducts have closed out slightly just to try and get some temperature in the tyres. Although you do tend to be running over a lot of puddles all the time, really, but I think it generally seems to cool the brakes too much in the wet. I ran with the same damper setup, although I have increased the rear. I'm not sure why I would have done that, but I would generally think they should be softer, to be honest. and I would be inclined just to run it something like that, to be honest. Mechanical grip, just again softened out the rear end of the car just to try and get better acceleration, more grip. And for some reason the car seemed to understeer a little bit in the wet. So I just dropped the anti-roll bar down a tiny bit, and also the brake bias to try and get the car to rotate more on corner exit. Again, just felt like the car was understeering on corner entry, so just reduced the brake bias. Again, for the wet tyres, just remember to adjust these tyre pressures and obviously change onto the wet tyre. As you can see down here, I needed to make that little adjustment for this setup. And again, looking at the traction control, a lot more traction control in this one because of the wet weather, and the ABS also going to engage a lot more just to try and stop the front tyres or any of the tyres locking up. And the ECU is running at 10 engine map. You can run 10 or 11. Like I've mentioned before in the description, there are engine maps. There is an engine map PDF and also a steering lock PDF, so you're welcome to have a look at those. But this just gives a little bit more progressive acceleration, but it is the qualifying engine map in wet weather, number 10. And the pressures again just adjusted to run around 30 psi when the tyres are nice and hot. Added a tiny bit more camber to the front, and like I mentioned, just adding more camber at the rear to get some more corner rear grip. And that's the setup. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If it's been useful, please do like and subscribe, share it, and yeah, apologies for the adverts throughout the videos, but like I've mentioned before, it's just to increase a little bit of revenue for a very small channel. So thanks for watching, and ciao for now.